I'd like to call up the chairmen from the various associations to the stage, please. Wayne Patch, Rob Wright, Dennis Sutton, Rolf Mitchell, John King and Shane Dewsbury. Now we get rid of our little dictator off the stage, we can hear some factual evidence from the people that run it all. Yeah, safer. I'm just about to read the disclaimer before I start on this. I don't know about putting your hand up to that. That might be safe. So just sort of kicking off or taking over from where sort of Michael left off. Wayne, first question to you regarding the sort of Bick on the Road. It's an annual event, part of our advocacy role with yourself and Michael travelling around meeting the ministers in all parts of government and senior executives, director generals. How do you feel that we're being received? How do you feel the state associations receive what we're doing? Because in the early days there was a bit argy-bargy about us sort of getting involved in state issues.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's a very mature relationship we have. It's a moving target, as everyone knows, with the state of politics, not just in our federal sphere, but in the individual states. It was interesting last week, there was a ministerial council meeting down here, and when you look at the room and the ministers who are in that room, it's highly likely by the next time they meet, 75% of them will be gone. So that's the sort of moving target that we have, and it's a vital part of the big work program that we go out and keep re-educating people, because when the ministers go under the current system, the staff go with them in a ministerial sense, in a political sense. So it's a constant re-education process. Lots of times directors general and secretaries of departments move with them too. So we're out there, but the beauty is that we have this. It was started when Stephen Lucas was chair years ago. Much tougher in those days, but the consistent approach that we've adopted, but we're accepted. One of the reasons we're accepted is because, as Michael said before, we're a policy and research group, and we're seen as that. They know we lobby, but we do the work before we come, and we very rarely ask for things. We don't go in and say, we want you to give us something. We're there to educate them on where we think they should be going for the benefit of their own communities and society. So that's why they actually appreciate the work that we do. It's first-class research work, and we're really kicking some goals. The relationship, I think, that's matured as well with the state associations. There was some cynicism, I suppose you might say, in the earlier times when Apsey and I'd fly into town and have these secret meetings with state ministers particularly. It's never been an issue federally, but more the fact that we were there without the representatives from the state used to cause some concern, I think. But that relationship now, in my view anyway, the boys will soon tell us, we'd never do anything that will adversely affect a state association. It's the fact that Michael and I on most occasions meet as just the two of us, without the state reps, I think makes it easier for an open discussion about things and easier to get in the door sometimes. So it's just going famously, Steve.
Good. The other presidents, have they got a comment on that?
That's me. John King from New South Wales. Look, it's a collaboration across the board on all states, but we've all got individual issues with our states and our politicians. And Wayne's right, when we lose one minister, we lose the Director Generals as such, and it's just a process of training again. But you know, training is an investment, not a cost, and at the end of the day, if we get the right message on the right day, it can all be on the same banner, but you'll always have that individual structure because of the local environment that we work in.
I think the more we can push the land use and transport message, the better. Certainly BIC's work makes it easier for state associations, but I think as long as we stick to the land use message and the transport policy, and then the states can look after state-based issues.
Steve, from a Queensland perspective, I mean, our association's only a small organisation, but just adding to what everyone's saying, I mean, the work that Wayne and Michael have done from the BIC perspective, it certainly backs up the work that the Cubic Association does, but it just puts that another layer on top, so it's very beneficial.
Ryan, comment?
Yes, Steve. From a Bus WA point of view, obviously our transport models, contract-wise, are quite different to the other states. But I know that from our point of view, Bus WA, whilst we are probably fiercely independent in a lot of ways, we still seek to have BIC as an overarching body to give us some leadership and some background to fall on when we are dealing with our state ministers, because federally, obviously, we don't have a voice without BIC.
From a Tassie point of view, we sort of appreciate BIC's involvement, because when Michael and Wayne come down and talk to our politicians, it gives us as a local association some credibility. We try to keep the BIC message out there, but we tailor it down for a Tassie need, such as the policy we brought out with the Hobart Corridor. We're too small of an association to do the groundwork by ourselves, and that's when the organisation of BIC really comes in handy. And then we use the same message to talk to our local politicians and feed in from the ground. And when we do have senators, well then hopefully they have that same message in the federal parliament.
Okay. Ray, question to you. You've had some issues over there in regards to your association that have now been addressed. But what is the current health of your association? What do you believe the health of the other associations are currently?
Steve, my involvement from a personal point of view is over 20 years in Bus WA. Most members are probably well aware we were part of under an umbrella of the West Australian Road Transport Association. I've been Deputy Chair of that for quite a while. We finally, in Bus WA, feel that we're in our strongest position ever. We've worked under a WATA umbrella where Bus WA had 2 members only on the Board of Management. We had a yearning, or I have a yearning to break from that, because I felt we were strangled. We had no control of our funds. We had Wally, who's worked very hard for us for over 14 years, seeking sponsorship, gaining a strong membership base, which we have. The last 2 years have been very traumatic in West Australia as far as the road transport industry goes, because the trucking side has really suffered. The training side collapsed. There was a point then where we were losing a serious amount of money, a 5-figure amount every month. Wally and I are now 2 committees. We have school bus, charter and tour, strong committees. We could see that we were going to go down with the ship. When first time we gained not-for-profit status. We're an incorporated body. Bus WA has broken away, and as of Monday, Monday just gone, when Wally and we all left to join you good people, we are a fully independent organisation with a small bankroll, but a strong membership and a focus on our 5-year review that Wally and I are undertaking now with our State Minister on the Evergreen contracts. We'll see that completed in July, the coming July. I'm very, very confident that Bus WA is in the best position it's ever been. We are in control of our own fate. We are in control of the service to the community and our members, and we are basically just an advocacy body, a lobbyist, whatever we need to do to keep the wheels of industry turning for the benefit of our members plus the communities we're involved. And our contracts, whilst they are different in flavour and nature to the rest of Australia, still have the same outcomes, which is people service and business sustainability. And those guidelines are what is driving Wally and our policy makers within Bus WA. And I'm very, very optimistic about our future. It's all hard work, but we have some really good people with expertise across our industry in WA, and we look forward to a really strong future, working with BIC on the federal level, and we're managing the state affairs, we believe, with our committees that are strong and have a focus for our survival. So yeah, Bus WA is better than we've ever been.
Do you think the core focus of the associations with the rationalisation of bus businesses in the major cities with the multinationals or the bigger players affected the associations?
I think that has a definite bearing. We run around about 280 members, which is still a strong family base. Most of our members are 5-to-1 bus owners. The bigger companies are in there. Bearing in mind the RPT services in Western Australia, obviously government-owned fleets under management to the bigger operators. So we still have a very strong family-based industry in Western Australia as far as charter and tour and school bus goes, Steve. So it's inevitable the way business works at this point in time, that the bigger operators will slowly but surely win their way across the market. But we still have a lot of family-based businesses that have strong regional representation and a good core base in the cities. So, yeah, there's no doubt it can be a shrinking membership market, but at this point in time it's strong, and we're working as strong as we can as an association to maintain that level of involvement in family business. And we're very fortunate that the bigger players are members of our association as well.
Good. To all the presidents, we will in a sec. I'm hosting this. Based on the last question to all the presidents, thoughts on the Bus Australia network? Should we just really change things up and move from a federal structure to a national structure and rationalise everything? Funding, service, advocacy, membership? Like we all have with industrial relations, for example, would we all, operators, suppliers, everyone involved, be better off? Have you got a position on that?
That's an interesting question. I agree with what John said before, though. There are fundamental state issues that have to be addressed at a state level, and if to keep the credibility that that BIC has, that Michael and I have when we walk into a minister's room, they know full well that we're not going to be talking to them about a contentious state issue. That's the real benefit of where we are now. There's obviously a downside in the cost of running state associations, but I can't see, and I've been doing this a long time now, and I've looked at every avenue where there can be rationalisation. I think that's happening slowly but surely. We see South Australia and Bus Vic having memorandums of understanding for backroom stuff. The stuff that Macca does, because that is now a national platform, that's an ideal opportunity to do that. Where we can do that, we do it. But I agree with John and the other fellows that there are absolutely specific state-based issues that really aren't in the ambit of a BIC's charter.
Yeah, certainly echo those comments. Certainly back office, as Wayne mentioned, we've got a memorandum of understanding with Bus SA, which is basically looking after our back office things. No use both associations having 2 accounts people, 2 membership officers, 2 social media and those sort of things. Certainly in its early days, but something that could develop. One of the comments I will make is a large proportion of our state membership are country and school bus regional operators, and to move to a national approach for them would be difficult for them to get their head around, I could imagine. They certainly rely on the state associations to not only represent them but sometimes run their businesses in terms of small things like long service leave claims and those sort of things. And I still think it's important that they're state functions.
That's quite correct, what Rob's saying. The previous question that you asked of Ray in respect of the larger operators and the rationalisation in cities, for instance, that's caused a shift and some concern, obviously, to state associations where some of the larger players decide not necessarily to be members of state, but they're all members of BIC. I want to make it perfectly clear that that's not an objective of BIC to attract those people in lieu of the states. It never has been and never will be. It's beneficial, clearly, to everyone in the room here that all of those players are members of BIC. I think the reasons, they form their own reasons why they're not members of state associations, but it's the level of the discussion and policy and research that we do at BIC that attracts those players, and some of the policy positions that state associations adopt don't suit the business models of some of those players. So I just want to make it very clear that BIC's not targeting membership in lieu of state membership. That's never been our objective.
I think from New South Wales' point of view that if you look at our membership, most of it's smaller operations like operators from 1 to, say, 10 buses. It's something that they are dealing with directly within state organisations, so we all struggle for membership from time to time and giving value for money to membership. And if they want to be a member of BIC, they can certainly do it. I am, but I'm also a member of the State Association. But if you're looking at the local demographic of what we're dealing with in New South Wales, with the proactive structure of New South Wales government at the moment, I'm not sure that one federal association could keep up with that. So in my view, I think you always have state associations to be able to drive the local content of the system, but the policies and procedures overall the government are planning cities. Now, we've looked at contradiction in terms here for the last 2 days about whether we go car share ride to multiple mode to mass transit. We all live in that environment, and we've got a lot of our memberships that are smaller operators that are going to have to go into that world. So state associations are going to get busier, not quieter.
Steve, I'd like to endorse those remarks. The state issues are live. When I say live, an example yesterday, 3-page email from the Department of Transport in Western Australia. Huge impact on our charter and tour division if it comes to fruit. There's an email I received, Wally received, which we put out to our members. In Western Australia, Uber has had a great influence on the taxi industry, which it has around the world. We had a green paper. They lumped charter and tour bus industry in with taxis. Seemed quite innocent at the time. The ramifications of that exploded yesterday on our email. There's a 3-page email there stating that the state government will buy back taxi plates, depending on what you paid. If you paid $250K, you get $100K. Scales down to 40, then to 32. How is this being funded? It's a live thing. They want 10% across every fare of charter and tour. Now I printed 35,000 brochures last week going out in all my local newspapers with set tour programs for 2018. Now they've just come across and said, we'll take 10% of that, Ray. Well, I bloody don't think they will. I wish them well. I wish them well. I tell you what. We need the state organisation. That's a live thing. Wally and I can't wait to get back on a plane. Well, not that we don't like you guys. The truth is there's an economic threat there that sits, even for a small operator like me, it's a $100K problem in a year just on day tours. Now, I'm not going to subsidise the taxi industry for a government policy that obviously doesn't stand up. So, whilst BIC has its role, these things, I couldn't expect APSI to drop everything and say, shit, I'll be there tonight, Ray. Well, Wally's there now. Ray's there now, Dennis is there now, our committees are there now. We're in action as of 3 o'clock yesterday when that email hit the screen. We have to stop that being legislated. And for us to ask Wayne and Michael to come over and do that, that also then puts them in an invidious position when they come over with a federal idea that they've hammered a state minister. It would alter their relationship, I'm sure their working relationship, federally, if they got too involved in state matters. And I think the overarching process that's in place with BIC and the state associations has still got the future's best interest at hand at this point in time. But we'll be fighting. I'm not buying taxi plates.
Steve, down in Tassie, our membership's really, really important to us, for us to survive as an organisation. And we find that our membership uses our organisation as a business tool, and it's a hands-on approach. It's where they have an issue on the day and they want to talk to someone on the day. And best we can handle that issue. And if we dilute that, I reckon, I agree with Rob, we may dilute our membership base, which then impacts on how we run our organisation.
Okay.
Steve, on the Queensland front, it's very similar to the other organisations. You know, it's that on-ground knowledge that is critical, I think, in all the states, and certainly I know in Queensland, you know, we have the various committees there, and it's just that local knowledge that you just can't buy. So it's critical to, you know, for the state associations to operate in that manner.
We spoke as far back as Fiji, obviously from a supplier point of view, with the rationalisation of the industry and what we saw was going to happen in the next several years with multinationals and things like that. Obviously that has a big impact on associations from funding point of view, when you get some of those larger operators pull away and aren't members. Are the state associations putting in plans to combat that and sort of move forward and be structurally sound? Obviously we've come from a fairly high plateau, and if we see some of those operators that have moved away, that's a large chunk out of the funding for those state associations, probably more on the eastern seaboard. Any comment on that?
Steve, most probably on the Queensland front. I mean, the operators that operate in Queensland certainly support the Queensland operation. It's more that making sure we don't lose focus on the family operations in our backyard. It's you know, the key players that are operating there, they're supporting the local association. There's maybe one or two that are obviously members of BIC but not members of Cubic, but fundamentally we're there as a team, but it's more about making sure we, you know, look after the regional people and the family operators, that we don't lose them.
Yeah, in Victoria, certainly the multinationals is a member. Who knows how the landscape changes in future, but certainly something the board looks at, and you know, BusVic enjoy other entities which keep our association strong, but you know, it's certainly something we look at each year and have to budget accordingly.
So New South Wales is very similar to that, but at the end of the day, we all run balance sheets every day. We get a cash flow in, we get an expenditure out, and as managers of bus operations or associations, we need to actually understand that there's a level of content to our membership. Most of our memberships, as we've been talking about, are our littler guys, and the multinationals certainly do, and as a large operator, we all contribute to a certain fact, but if we can all balance our balance sheet and make value for money, you'll grow your membership. And we typically grow our membership when, well, in New South Wales certainly, where you get government that's being very proactive on transport at the moment, and our membership actually need us more now when we're going through contracting or change than what we do if nothing's happening on the field. So it's very important that the associations keep very proactive with government to take the next challenge. And as we've seen in the last 2 days, there's a lot of challenges coming up. So that's when our membership will grow and engage with us.
Thank you. I suppose sort of one last question from a supplier point of view, I've got to throw it in. A bus expo every 2 years, is that too many? Does technology change that quickly for us? Should it be held in just one place, then with some sort of divvy up of the funds based on the number of operators that attend from each state?
Who are you asking?
Everyone.
Come on, Wayne, you're leading the show there. You got a view?
Look, Steve, it's a hard one to answer because expos obviously grow revenue for your membership. So in New South Wales, we need to give services back to our membership, so obviously we need some revenue. Why I say it's hard now though, just have a look at what we've learnt in the last 2 days. What will an expo be like in 5 years' time? I just got back from the World Bus Show where you saw heavy industrial engines being 5 years ago dominating those floors, and I reckon there was well over 50% electric. So we're going into a different world anyway. So, you know, do we actually have to go 1, 2 or 3? I think natural attrition is going to fix that for us.
Yeah, I agree, John. Michael and I've just been over to the APTA Expo and AGM in Atlanta, Georgia, as I said on Monday morning, and the trend's exactly the same there, John. It's just electric, but they only do that every 3 years. So there's something in that for all of us, I think, that technology is moving quickly, but they've determined as an industry, and it's not just buses, they look at trains and light rail and the whole box and dice, and they've determined that the 3-year expos are sufficient. So without putting too fine a point on it, there seems to be a fair bit of credibility in the idea that we do it too frequently.
From a West Australian point of view, obviously, Steve, we just as a Bus WA have a very small bus show at our annual general meeting, which is well supported by the companies that can avail our staff and vehicles for that day. We understand the logistics of the location of Western Australia for bus shows, etc. We probably are happy with what happens. As far as what happens for the rest of Australia, it would be pretty much, we'd probably be out of place to have a comment for the simple reason of our isolation. We don't have an expectation that all of the vehicle manufacturers and suppliers would launch into WA once in every 5 years or on a rotational basis. The logistics and the expense of that, we all know. Our main focus is we do a small bus show at our AGM. We have to keep relevant to our members. Relevant to our members is our aim, but we are sourcing the information they need. So that's a bigger stakes picture for the Eastern Seaboard, obviously, where they generate large amount of income. So that's never been in our budget.
Rob?
Obviously, we've just had the first expo at the Gold Coast in September, and I think obviously that was a fairly big effort for our association to, with David and Sarah at the association to organise. But all in all, I think it was a great success. We are of the view of supporting that, the two-year model. Obviously, that's been discussed with the EDs from the state associations. We've started the journey. I think, obviously the next one will be interesting to see how it works, but every 2 years seems to be one that may work for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's come a long way. I think as long as it's supported, the membership from all associations, then I think it's valid. And I think, we heard last night we're potentially moving to shorter vehicle lifespan and that sort of thing, so it may become more relevant to have them more often than not.
Okay, thank you. Has anyone on the floor got any questions for the chairman or on the subjects we've spoken about, or comments?
Anyone awake?
Anyone awake? Well, I think, Michael,
I didn't have a question. I was just wondering whether the transgender people yesterday actually got their Christmas party. 61% is the answer, by the way.
Was it?
61%. 61%, yes. No, I didn't have a question. Mac had probably...
We wanted to know what the presidents thought about that.
Be a good idea if we had a parliament to vote on it.
No
I might
questions?
say, actually, it's important just to have this discussion. I think we all agree that state associations and BIC work well together. We work well with the executive directors. It's important, though, for the broader industry to understand that we actually are working together. That's why we thought it was important to have the chairman just have a general chat. So we actually, because these issues, were first discussed in 2011. The sign of a mature industry is you can have these types of discussions, and actually, I get it in my own view, actually brings us closer together, so we work better together, and you can always further improve what's already a pretty good model. And so self-improvement's a good ongoing exercise. So I appreciate the chairman's honest comments and where we're at, because I think it's pretty much my gut feel working with the state associations is exactly where you guys are all at. And I hope the audience are happy with the state associations and BIC. That's part of the exercise as well. And you're here, that's good. But sure opportunity to say something as well.
I actually did have a question, and Bubbles, I thought you might have given... Ray's example was sensational. I thought if confidentiality doesn't stop you, I think the audience would like to hear your story about the fairs. I thought that was an excellent one, that you and Jeff, in relation to the fairs, are you Are you able to recant that?
Yeah, I will. You mean the student fares that...
Yeah, that the bureaucrats are wanting to increase.
Yeah, each year the department looks at our student fares, and our student fares around about $1.70, and that means anyone that's a student can ride 7 days a week under that fare. And they was going to put it up this year again, and we've had a steep rise, and we was just concerned as an organisation that we're going to put the fares up in February, and then there's an election in March. And what happens is that it comes back to the bus operator because the fares are gone up and they're handling that issue. And then it becomes a local issue. And so it was just raised that with our ministers, is it a good thing to do? You know, we're going through a review of the system. The contracts are getting changed. They're looking at diluting services or adding services, and it just added another complexity to it, to the discussion, and it took faith, we thought, it took faith away from the operators who were going by and going on to new contracts, looking at network design, but at the same time putting the fares up. And we just said, look, how about putting the product in first and then saying this is what you're going to pay for. So try to put better buses in, better services, and then the government of the day, where it may be, come out and say, well, we've done this, let's put the fares up. So that's what we did.
But Bubbles is being humble because what he simply meant to say was the bureaucrats wanted to put the fares up like they do every year. There was an election around the corner. It wasn't in the interests of his operators to have their fares put up because they were paying for it, and they simply went to the minister and said, have you got two heads? You've got an election coming up, don't put those fares up. So it's a classic example of where the autonomy of the State Association working on the ground, on the spot, exactly as Ray says, can make a substantial and fundamental change. The changes and impacts that BIC has on the industry are longer term, and they take some time to take, like mass limits, which I've been waiting for 25 years since I've been in the industry, and I'm sure it'll happen before I part company, but the state associations have that ability to do that, and all power to them.
I think from the suppliers' point of view is the relationship between the state associations and BIC is strong. I think it's healthy to have the argy-bargy that we have between associations and the suppliers. But probably the key thing, again, in the last several years is the relationship between the supplier group and the state bureaucrats and regulation and things like that. So while all the state groups have their technical committees and things like that, it's quite often the case that the state people are actually calling in the OEMs and discussing things. And we need to make sure we stay close on that, because what we're discussing or what the state people are trying to implement can actually impact your business in regard to your day-to-day servicing. Now, if they implement this and they actually don't reward you for carrying out these services, that's a cost to your business. So we need to stay close and make sure that we're working together, that we're not sort of dictated to and made do things that we actually don't need to do. And I think that's important moving forward. Like yesterday, we had a 4-hour meeting yesterday and we covered 19 topics that are currently being discussed with various state and federal departments. So it's a big work program for the suppliers. Obviously, the ideal thing is to grow patronage on all the operators' buses and we can sell more buses, but in the background we've got to realise that it is only a very small industry in regards to new vehicles, and we've got to be at the forefront all the time of doing those sorts of things, otherwise the regulators will just make it too hard for us all. Right. Well, I think that's the end now. Michael will take over and do some housekeeping. Thank you very much.